Take 2.0. It's me, Arista, and I'm in the kitchen, and there's a lot of ambient noise, like Matthew running away, and cats running, and the fan that's supposed to make my plants be less overwatered, and the dehydrator that I'm using, bizarrely enough, to prove bread. It's been a real calamitous start to this video. First things first, nothing worked. None of our phones, cameras, microphones, lights, nothing worked at all. Then I was like, oh my gosh, I'll get ahead of the game and I'll prep some stuff like a real grown-up cook would. And I was microwaving butter, which I always do for this recipe, and it exploded. It exploded in the microwave. I don't know why, but here we are. I have coffee. We're gonna make cinnamon rolls. Bless those of you who bought some from me, which gave me the impetus to make this video again. I would say this is the recipe I make most often. Of anything that I make, I've made this 4 zillion times. I've made it sweet, I've made it savory, I've failed it, I've nailed it. And I'm gonna link the recipe down in the description box below, and I'm gonna give you a couple hacks that I use to make it the bestest. We already have some things prepped. I prepped some heavily buttered pans. This is what our little roll buddies are gonna go into. The cool thing about this recipe is that it uses melted butter. So you could probably just use regular margarine. I never have for the actual dough itself. I think the key difference between vegan butter and vegan margarine is the moisture content. Because I still haven't found a vegan butter that makes good, like, melty shortbread. There's something about it, it just doesn't work properly. So I've used about half of the vegan Baysal bricks and half of the melt buttery sticks, which is kind of my go-to for baking. I have this gigantic bowl. It is the only bowl that I have because I'm currently a bread bakery in anticipation of delivering food to folks. So I am going to be interrupted in 3 minutes to take care of that sourdough. You get to witness that too. We're gonna make a double batch because that's who we are as people. I'm gonna whisk together this butter that has been melted. So technically the recipe just calls for half a cup. I've doubled it, so a cup, but I did about 1.5 cups. I like to add extra butter. We're gonna take that, we need to add sugar. 1/4 cup, AKA half a cup. So we're gonna add, am I doing this right? Yeah. 1 and 2. This would be the point if you wanted to make this savory. This is where I usually put less than half of the recommended sugar, and I would add things like, when I made pizza rolls using this recipe, I put in oregano and basil, garlic powder, because we're making the dough, right? So you want it to be flavorful. So we have butter, we have sugar. We need to add a total of 4 cups of milk at room temperature. This is an oat one because that's what I have. I do have a preference for oat to drink, but I typically use soy in baking. This recipe does call for yeast, so we're gonna get a little brave. Here's the thing about yeast. It has to be the right temperature. When I first started using yeast, I was very nervous about it. Cool, that's the bread time. So you can witness the bread in action. I probably sell the most of this. This is a caramelized onion and rosemary sourdough. Day 2, it's a 3-day recipe, I know. Day 2, you do this stretch and fold, which is that. And you have to throw it, otherwise it doesn't count. And you have to do them every half an hour for, I don't know, sometimes up to about 6 hours. So that's why sourdough is not an easy task. And I actually sold 4 loaves, which means that we have double batch of this going as well. Sourdough is like 90% timing. I have literally taken sourdough in the car with me and on drives because it just has a will of its own. And you have to respect that. You have to turn it every 30 minutes until it's a big juicy boy and it's ready to have a sleep until it is baked. We were talking about yeast. It has to be the right temperature. At first I was very nervous about it. I used a thermometer. I was ooky spooked about it. Guess what? It's not that complicated, but I can tell you right now, this feels cold. Even though the explosive butter is in there, it's not warm enough, which means we need to microwave this, hopefully to non-explosive results, just a bit so that it's warm. Lots of recipes, including the one I'm using, call for a packet of yeast. A packet of yeast is 2 1/4 teaspoons, so you can just buy the big boys of yeast, active dry yeast, and use those instead. It's so much cheaper and so much less waste. In my heart, I feel that it needs an extra 30 seconds. My heart is true. It should feel like the literal opposite of what all the people that used to come in and ask you for piping hot coffee wanted. Like, tepid. For the yeast. It has to be like cozy warm for them to grow. So basically what we're doing is we're giving them a nice little cuddly bath, and then they're gonna get to work once we add the flour and the salt, and that's gonna become our risen dough. So it's like just above lukewarm. We're doubling it, which means we need every yeast. The thing that I've learned with yeast and bread is that it's much less of an exact science than you think. We're gonna give that a minute of bathing, and it's much more of like an art, which is maybe the most pretentious thing I've ever said, but you'll see when I start adding flour, this is really about like what it feels like. Like when it comes to baking sourdough, it ends up being, what does it feel like? Does it feel bubbly and like ready for its nap? And I would imagine that that's really annoying because you can't really teach that. It means there's lots of failure along the way. This is good to go. So now we're gonna add all of our flour. And I say all of it because it's a lot. The recipe calls for 5 cups for one batch. We're gonna do a double, but like I mentioned, this is the Arista hack part. Please. So I've got this on a scale because, excuse me. Please. Thank you. The hack is we're gonna add less flour, and like I've mentioned in previous videos, I now use a scale for everything that calls for flour because it's so easy to use too much. It needs to be like fluffy in your measuring cup. So, okay, the recipe calls for 5 cups. We're gonna use double that, hypothetically. This is the worst. Okay, the recipe calls for 5 cups, which we need to double, which is 10 cups, which is such flour. However, we're not gonna measure by cups, we're gonna measure by weight, and we're gonna underflour. So what we're doing is adding more butter and less flour. That's sort of the main hack, although I do tend to let it have an extra rise, which you'll see. And that makes it this like really just like buttery, fluffy. I am essentially just talking so much because I want to avoid having to try to do the math on camera for how much flour I need. So I said we're gonna do less. So let's start with 4 cups, times 2 is 8 cups. A cup is 120 grams of flour. We're timesing that by 8. Again, like, you don't need to be precious about this. We're just trying to get to the right measurement. 913, 980. So maybe you do need to be precious about it. Boom. 960. So for a single recipe, they're asking for a teaspoon. We're doing a double. We're not going to short on salt. And like I said, if we were doing this as a savory recipe, we would be, I usually double the salt and do significantly less sugar. A little extra. We're looking for a certain consistency. Am I nervous that we let the yeast sit in there for much too long without adding the flour? Absolutely. We'll see how it goes. So I'm looking at this and it's soup. It's certainly not dough. It needs more flour. So let's add some more. I'm gonna say that much more. We're gonna start there. If you wanted, you could just make this recipe exactly how it calls by doing the 5 cups. But I'm looking for a very specific texture. See how it's starting to like pull away from the edges of the bowl there? It's telling me that it's close. Because it's gloopy. Like this part is almost floury enough. Yeah, see, now it's starting to look like a dough and not just like a bloop. Get this stuff from the sides there. Okay, I'm gonna say that she looks good. As you can see, it's still pretty moist, but it pulls away from the sides of the bowl quite easily. It feels like a bread dough, which, I mean, we're basically making sweet bread, right? So, boom. Now, but see how sticky it is? That's still not enough. We might have to compensate a bit for the extra butter that went in there. Okay. Let's say that. Let's do that much. This will now need to rise for a good while. The last time I filmed this video, I tried to hack that a little bit and do a bit of a quicker rise. And I'm just not sure that that worked out so hot for me. So let's be patient. Let's keep it like a cozy temperature without trying to hasten its development. So typically I will just put it in the oven with the oven light on. Our oven light is broken because that's what everything is here. Just broken and failing. So I previously had cooked bread in here. It's still nice and warm. It's 11:10. I think it calls for an hour. And we want it to double in size. We're now going to take this opportunity of dough rest to do some other things. We're going to make the cinnamon and sugar inside filling. Inside was a weird way to say it. This recipe is a little unique in that it calls for brown sugar. Did I notice this for the first 20 times I made this recipe? Certainly not. I used white and it was fine. But using this brown sugar makes it really like caramelly. It's super good. So I would highly advise using a brown sugar. The recipe itself calls for 3/4 of a cup but we're doing a double, so we're gonna do a 1.5 cups. This is, again, in exact science land because this is filling, so it's mostly just to taste. If we were doing savory rolls, we would not make this. Shocking, I'm aware. We would not make this. I have done caramelized onions to put in. I've done, like I said, pizza rolls. So I did some very lightly sauteed mushrooms, caramelized onion, tomato sauce, and herbs, and then some veggie cheese. I guess all cheese is vegetarian, and then some non-dairy cheese. I've done pesto. The pesto is my favorite because it's really like bright and green and herby and tart, and then the rolls are super buttery and flaky. I don't know if flaky is the right word. It's like fluffy. I've had really dense cinnamon buns and like they're still very good, but I basically am trying to make cinnabons. Now, do you know about Cinnabon? When I was little and I lived in Edmonton, there was a cinnamon-bon. There was a Cinnabon at West Edmonton Mall by the HMV on like a pirate ship, which, I mean, it's already so good. It's already Cinnabon. 2, we're doing 4 tablespoons of cinnamon. 3, 4. Pirate ship cinnamon bun. And it was probably the most appealing thing that's ever happened to me in my life. I think warming spices, so like ginger, cinnamon, nutmeg, basically anything that uses those I like. I love cinnamon. Cinnabon was like a long lost dream. Cinnabon was so expensive, and you got these like gigantic cinnamon rolls. Maybe all of you know Cinnabon. Anyways, they're really, really fluffy and really buttery and really like, oh my God, they were so good. I was not allowed to get Cinnabon, and so I yearned for it. And I think when I did get it, it made me violently ill because it's basically just butter and milk. So replicating it feels like a gift. Our cinnamon sugar is done. If you remember Cinnabon, you will remember that everything was glazed. You could also get cream cheese icing, which I'm super into. Just think the glaze adds a lot. The dough itself isn't super sweet. Considering that we're making a shit ton of cinnamon buns, I only put about 1/2 cup of sugar in there. So the glaze helps out, kind of helps balance it. Now you're wondering, Arista, what is this? It is vanilla bean paste that I ran out of and have been trying to extend the life out of by pouring regular vanilla into it so that regular vanilla gets a little vanilla bean essence, you know? Glaze, the inexactest of sciences. You just add it until it looks like it's right. And there isn't really a way to do it wrong. Which of course, now that I've said that, I will figure out the way to do that. So keep in mind, we're basically making like 24 cinnamon buns. So we want to have a fair amount of glaze. But see how easy that came together? It's just like a swoop, a floof and swoosh. This is as thick as you would want it because you want to be able to like drizzle it on like that. So that's good. Filling, glaze, done. Know what that means? All of our friggin' prep is done, bud. And we can now move into the kitchen confessionals portion of this video. Why I want to call it that, I don't know. It just came to me and I really like it. When I filmed this video over a week ago and it was lost to technology, I talked a lot about a lot of things, which is probably why the video didn't save, because it was still a really big video. Most importantly, I wanted to talk about something that is completely non-role related, but you have to forgive me for, and that is fat positivity, body neutrality, and anti-diet culture. So I'm talking about Cinnabon. I'm talking about my unrequited lust for Cinnabon. And an important part of that conversation is that it wasn't a food that I was allowed to have because of my mother's relationship to food, but also because of my own. And I know some people approach things like veganism or plant-based eating as a diet, as like a means of controlling the size of their body. That is fundamentally not what I want to do here. I really, really don't want that to be what this is for, if that wasn't already evidenced by like, I'm picking comforting, delicious food, hopefully, that is about like nurturing and sentimentality. And like, I think for me, like a big part of it is finding food that just feels good to eat, because that's not, you know, as someone with chronic illness and someone with a lot of food intolerances, that was kind of a rarity. And so there's like a healing full circle thing in making Cinnabons that I can eat, that I love to eat, that I love to share, that don't make me feel sick, that don't cost me $1 million, because they were really expensive. And no, that's it. They're great. Finding food that is nourishing on multiple levels. This is nourishing because I think cinnamon buns are my favorite baked good, but also because I have this like really long-standing relationship to the longing of Cinnabon. And being able to nourish myself and make that for myself feels like such a cool way to connect with like young Arista, who was just this like dorky little kid and didn't understand why certain foods were good and certain foods were bad. So this will never be a space where certain foods are good and certain foods are bad. This will just be a space for good food that tastes good and feels. Plot twist, it's me editing Arista, and at this point my primary camera became too full of all the talking that I did and deleted all the future content, which means you get a really scenic hand view for the next little while. Sorry. It's been just a little bit over an hour. This is an absolute hot mess. We're making one or two. I do find using less flour, more butter, you'll get a more intense rise. Totally fine. We're not mad about it. The cool thing is, it leads to what I call the Mennonite funeral bun factor, which is, if you've ever been to a Mennonite funeral, they always have these buns. The buns are really, really soft, but they have almost like a hard, floury outside, and it's delicious. Before I did this, I wet my hands. Just as a general rule, when you're working with dough, it helps a lot. So let's bloop this big boy out of here. Incredibly sticky, tacky, loose dough. We're not freaking out about it. We're not mad. The original recipe actually calls to add more flour. Add more flour at this point. So we're just gonna add extra more flour. I am committed to getting all this out of here, so I'm just gonna go get my bench scraper. This is a tool that I didn't think I cared about until I just needed it so much. Like, you can see how helpful it is for something like this. It's also fantastic for cleaning up this mess. What we have now is just the gloopiest mess. And we're gonna be pretty generous with the flour. I'm flipping it. The initial recipe calls to knead it lightly. I don't do much of that. It's got a beautiful texture to it. Like, look at that. Oh, so satisfying. Hopefully I didn't brutally underflour. We'll find out. Because it's really, really, like, look at that. It's pretty cool. I'm trying here just to get all the different parts of this floured nicely. And then I'm actually gonna split it in half because we have a double recipe. So again, just by eyeball, that looks pretty good. I'm gonna flour that a bit more. And then see here. So you can start to see the gluten breakdown. We're not mad about it, I don't think. I don't think I really know what I'm talking about. This is really bloopy. So I'm showing you the bread. Don't want these to touch. I'm showing you the bread a little later along. I keep washing and rinsing and making sure my hands are wet. Now you can see it's starting to get like bubbly. So this is actually almost ready to take a nap. We'll give it some more time. Because I've added about 2 whole caramelized onions, it's really tacky. But we're not mad about it. So it's been 3 turns since you saw it last. Because it's in that makeshift proofing drawer, it's rising a bit quicker because it's warmer in there. Let's see. I don't know if you can see this, but this was slipping away. It was that Robin Williams movie with the like blubber? 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 The green slime? The more precise you get with this, just the nicer it's gonna look. Margarine, and I'm gonna really go for it. I just touch everything as much as I can because as it, as it develops and as it rises, I can get a better sense of kind of what I'm looking for and what the dough should feel like. And this dough will either not work or be phenomenal because it's just that moist, that effervescent. Okay, so we've got a good layer of butter there. We're gonna add half of that cinnamon sugar mixture. It will seem like a lot, but keep in mind this is brown sugar, which I guess is just as sweet. But we're kind of looking for it to caramelize, like I mentioned. So don't be scared. I am leaving a little bit of a trim there, just because it'll make it easier for rolling. I think that looks good. It's pretty level, really tight roll. It's not gonna be easy because this dough is so soft. So we're gonna, it's like kind of like that rolling a sleeping bag. If you ever went camping, you have to roll your sleeping bag super tight. Oh. So I'm noticing here that my dough needs a little bit more flour. There we go. I'm kind of tucking in a bit at the end here, because we're gonna get a bit of a wonky end piece. Okay. This is a real sluggy boy. It's very slug-like. So now we have this log. Once again, I'm flouring. So we're basically making like a really moist dough that's really beautiful and buttery and flaky with almost like a flour crust on it. We're gonna try and get this sort of as even as possible. Like I said, it'll be disastrous or it'll be fantastic. We're gonna put the slug to death. So we're looking for about halfway. I'm gonna call it that. I usually use, I don't want to use that. Let's be decisive here, buds. And then I just kind of etch out what I think, like that's medium. Ooh, she is loose. 3, 4, 5. This is gonna go in here. So ideally, we would just be using these round trays. They're kind of like a, well, they are a pie plate because they make a really nice sort of like batch and they bake up beautifully. Wow, these are not floury. We'll see how it goes. And the function here is that these are all going to stick together. That looks like absolute trash. Good, 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 good. Great, great, great. They're gonna stick together and help each other rise. So they're basically like providing a barrier. Ooh, I don't know about this, friends. Guess we'll see. Cleaning this just so that everything isn't covered in cinnamon. And we're going to aggressively flour again here. And then I'm going to show this baby who's boss. Okay. So yeah, see how it's sort of like stiffening? That's good. These need 30 minutes for their rise. We're probably gonna check on them before then. We also need to set our oven 350. I'm someone who has had a really complicated relationship with gender. Whoa, I get nervous. Here's what I'm picturing. I'm here cleaning up genuinely a mess, and you're actually sitting right there, and we're going to talk about gender. We're going to talk about gender roles as I clean, and I'm sure this noise is going to be horrific for some of you, so maybe I won't clean, but I have to clean. I don't know why I get nervous talking about this. I think this is why my previous attempt at this video was so like crushing when it didn't save, because it's emotionally kind of exhausting trying to navigate talking about your own experiences in a weird sort of public way when you're trying to be authentic, but like inherently I'm being calculated and like being super mindful about what I say and trying to not say anything that's like harmful or oppressive to anyone. So bear with me if this is a little bit stumbly. So at this point, the second camera failed. And then I decided, you know what? It's time to make a Patreon so I can get an actual camera and not have footage disappear. This is the third time. So that's my goal of the Patreon. And I will be posting on there more regularly, 6 or more times a month. There will be additional videos on there. There'll be a recipe every month that I come up with. I think it will be cool. And like, you can join for $3 a month. So if you feel like hanging out on Patreon with me, link is in the description box. Thank you. Is that to win them back? Yeah. The camel broke. Slash didn't have enough room on it because apparently I'm cursed. A cinnamon bun party. So you can see, hopefully, kind of what I meant. They're quite floured on the outside, but they're really soft inside. Are they the most beautiful cinnamon buns I've ever created? Certainly not. But if you watched last week's video, you know that I'm capable of it. It just wasn't the day, you know? Also, last time I made cinnamon buns that looked like this, that were like kind of wonky, they were the best cinnamon buns I've ever made. So, we're gonna do them a little glaze. By a little, I mean like a pretty generous amount of glaze. The dough itself, again, isn't overly sweet, so you don't need to be worried about overdoing it on glaze, because additionally, like it'll just run right off if there's too much. I found that the best vegan cream cheese icing is by just creaming the cream cheese, no butter. Otherwise, you kind of lose a lot of that tart cream cheesy flavor. Okay, we did it. Thanks, everyone. There's a little cat who wants to say hello. Thanks, everyone. We did it. Hello. You love chopping?